Hey mamas, good morning. It's your midwife Kyra here, also known as your CajunStork. Today we are going to have a discussion on bringing home birth to the hospital. And also I'm going to give you some natural techniques and tips from a midwife's perspective on how to have your best hospital birth. But before I begin, my name is Midwife Kyra and I believe in truly natural birth because I know that it makes for better birth experiences. Consider subscribing to my channel and join us this year where we're going to be more consistent and doing a video every Midwife Monday. So let's go ahead and get started. So a little side note about me is even though I am a midwife and I have had two births, I've had a hospital birth where I was high risk and delivered in the hospital for my first, and I had a home birth for my second. Even as a midwife, I'm actually not even a candidate for home births or using a midwife in the future. I have actually some very obscure bleeding issue and I'm not even a candidate. And so I can completely sympathize with our mamas who are watching this out there who want to bring these natural birth techniques to the hospital, or even the idea of bringing a home birth to the hospital. However, I'm going to give you a complete spoiler alert here. Unfortunately, the idea of bringing a home birth to the hospital is not a thing. I know there's books about it. I know there's a big push about it on the internet. You guys, I've attended a ton of births, both in the hospital and at home and in my birth center in Louisiana, and you cannot bring a home birth to the hospital. So let's start there. I want you guys to get that idea out of your head. And what I want to do today is give you several tips, 5 tips actually, on how to have a great hospital birth. And for those of you who are planning a midwife delivery, whether with us at our birth center or at a home birth, you can also use these tips yourself. So what is the first intervention we apply to a mother's labor? I was really shocked, but when you really think about it, the first intervention we apply to a mother's labor is actually mom leaving her house. So yeah, birth center birthers. That means you even with a good midwife who is hands-off and low risk and all those things, you are applying an intervention to your birth with the first step of just leaving your home. It changes the hormone processes. It changes your perception of what's happening to you. And if you've ever labored in the car, that's definitely intense. I wouldn't wish that, active labor or transition on anybody in the car. The second intervention that we apply to a mom's labor is, anybody want to guess? Post in the comments below if you want to guess what the second intervention we apply to our labor is. I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys the second intervention is bringing strangers to your birth. So most ideas of bringing like a home birth into a hospital setting is that you know your provider, or another way to look at it is you know who's labor sitting with you. So at the birth center, I always tell my mamas that the midwives you build a relationship with in your pregnancy actually show up at the birth center when you show up, stay the whole labor, and go home when you go home. So you are labor sat, for lack of a better word, by your midwives who you know. But unfortunately, when we show up at the hospital, even though we might request a natural birth friendly nurse, or we might know the nurse that we're requesting, these 12-hour shifts don't always accommodate our labor schedules. And so the second intervention we apply is having strangers at our birth. And I have a tip for that in just a couple minutes. So hospital birthers, don't lose hope. I have more coming. The third intervention we apply in a planned hospital birth is routine needle sticks. So birth is a natural process, and when we're trying to have an unmedicated, natural or truly natural birth, we need to be left alone. In fact, as a midwife, I believe that birth is safer the more we leave it alone. So this idea of doing routine vaginal exams or routine saline locks, just in case you need IV fluids, that actually impacts your emotions. It impacts your adrenaline, which is not something we want to be having in labor. We really want to be focusing on the love hormone, the relaxing hormone, oxytocin. So leaving your home is the first intervention, strangers at your birth is your second intervention, and routine needle sticks is your third intervention. So what is a hospital birther supposed to do when they're really trying to bring this idea of a home birth to the hospital? What would I do if I decided to have another baby in the future, knowing that I'm not even a candidate for a midwife? So let's jump into our tips. Let's talk about things we can do instead. Number 1, I want you to research everything. If I can get 100 likes to this video on this Friday, by this Friday, I'm going to go ahead and release a blog post on my website with topics of all the things that I believe you should research during your pregnancy. So if you have an opportunity, take a moment and press the like button so that I know that you mamas want to have access to that information. We're going to talk about everything you should research. So early in pregnancy, you're probably thinking about researching things like miscarriage, or eating healthy, what exercises can I do, is sex safe in pregnancy? But unfortunately, believe it or not, we actually don't start thinking about our births till like closer to 30 weeks. So I want to give you guys a list of things you need to be researching before 30 weeks of pregnancy on what to do and how to prepare for all of the things that are going to be offered to you for your upcoming labor. Tip number 2, I want you to take a non-hospital based childbirth education class. So it depends on what you have in your area. I highly recommend classes like Lamaze, hypnobirthing. I'm not a fan of hypnobabies. Sorry guys if you're hypnobabies lovers, but I am a hypnobirthing fan. But Birth Boot Camp is also another really good one. These are great classes that you can take. What I do not recommend is taking a hospital-based childbirth class, even if it's called Natural Birth in the Hospital. Guys, most hospital classes are here just to talk to you about routine things that we do to you in the hospital. How many bags of fluid you have to have before you get an epidural. If you're going for a truly natural birth, those hospital classes will not benefit you. Go out of your way, find the funds, ask for it at your baby shower, take a non-hospital based childbirth education class. And what you'll find is you're gonna learn how to be a mom giving birth rather than learning about the medical procedures that are going to be offered to you. And this is really what you're looking for. How can you have your best hospital birth? Get prepared. Okay, number 3. If you're going through your pregnancy, you're spending time with your provider. Now, let me pause there. With midwives, you typically get 1-hour-long appointments. They're almost like counseling sessions. There's a whole checklist, like a prenatal program, childbirth education kind of infused in your prenatal appointments. Unfortunately, if you are planning a hospital birth, you likely have an OB, at least down here in Louisiana, and that means you might get 5 to 7 minute appointments. So I would like to suggest that you write your questions in your phone so that when you get to your provider, you don't get nervous and forget your questions. You get to ask the important things. Now, back to what I was talking about. If you're going through your pregnancy and those 5 to 7 minute appointments are not feeling fulfilling, you're not getting your questions answered, you're not feeling like you're being heard, or as one of my, I do prenatal care for VBACs occasionally. One of my mamas recently said at her initial visit, she asked her OB, do you think I could VBAC? And he goes, we'll talk about that later in your pregnancy. That is not the provider for you. What I want you to do is follow your heart. Any time in your pregnancy, from the day you walk in to the day before you give birth, if you're feeling a heart change, if you're feeling a change that this may not be the right fit for you, please change your provider. Now, planned hospital births, that might look like interviewing other OBGYNs. It might look like switching or interviewing your local birth center or maybe a home birth midwife, because as I always say, if you don't ask questions and get to know your options, then you don't have any. But I want to encourage you mamas, follow your gut. If you're feeling a heart change, then you might need a provider change. Even if you're 36 weeks, even if you're 39 weeks pregnant, if you and your provider are not aligning and you don't feel confident and comfortable asking questions in your appointments when you're not in the throes and hormones of labor, you're definitely not going to be comfortable when you are in labor and open to suggestion and feeling very vulnerable and, very, very focused. Number 4, if you choose a hospital birth, or if you're like me and you have to have a hospital birth, unfortunately, don't birth in the hospital without a birth doula. This is one of the best tips I could give you. Now, y'all, I could talk about midwives all day, the benefits of midwifery, how it impacts your pregnancy, how it increases your risk of vaginal delivery, lowers your risk of cesareans, and all those other things. But doulas also have great evidence to support them too. In fact, once upon a time, it was said that if a doula was a drug in labor, it would be unethical not to use them. Do your research on the benefits of a doula. And then how to hire a doula. Well, it depends on your area. Here in Lafayette, we have monthly Meet the Doula nights where you can go and interview local doulas. I always recommend you interview 2 or 3 doulas at a minimum, and always try to find a doula that matches your personality. Your doctor may not support doulas, but as a birthing mama, you have the right to bring to your birth whoever you want. So even if your doctor is anti-doula, which by the way, big red flag, right? You need to be interviewing and getting yourself prepared with a birth doula at your birth. Now, of course, I always say choose midwives, but if you can't, doulas are the absolute next best thing. And with that said, as a midwife, I not only hired a doula for my home birth, but I highly recommend doulas for your birth no matter where you birth. Tip number 5, a birth plan. So one of these days I've committed to making a video on how to write a really good birth plan that actually gets read. But what you need to know is when you're writing a birth plan, you need bulleted points of topics that are most important to you that are not routine hospital policy. For example, here in Lafayette, they really try hard to do skin to skin after the delivery. So having my moms put on their birth plan wanting skin to skin is a waste of the resource of having a birth plan because no one's going to read all those bullet points. However, if you come from certain religions where once the baby is born, the father has to whisper a prayer in the baby's ear before anyone in the room can speak, or if you come from some kind of, let's say, sexual trauma background where there's certain things that need to unfold in a certain way for you to feel safe in the environment that you're birthing in. Or it could just be as simple as something that's absolutely important to you and it's something you need to have it written. A birth plan with bulleted points will get your birth plan read by your providers, respected, and understood among your birth team. So those are some of my tips on how to bring some of these home birth tips out to the hospital. If you have any questions, I want you guys to go ahead and post them in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you guys next Midwife Monday. And I haven't picked my topic yet, but I'm sure it's going to be fun, and I hope it helps you guys have a great birth experience. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.